Chapter 2. In the days following the boy's disappearance, I was constantly wondering where and why he'd gone. He could barely move. He couldn't have gone far, I thought, tempted to search for him. No, he saved me a lot of trouble. What if my parents had seen him? During that time, it occurred to me that I'd seen the boy somewhere before. It was strange, not a memory exactly, but some sort of picture. But that was silly. I'd never seen him or anyone like him before in my life. I would have remembered if I'd met someone with wings. About a week after the day he'd first crashed, I was listening to the pitter-patter of rain on my window. Yet again, I was thinking about the boy. Being able to fly was one of my greatest wishes, one that I'd thought could never happen. If he can fly, why can't I? I complained aloud. There has to be a way to get wings. That boy was living proof. I jumped slightly at the sound of thunder in the distance. The monsoon season had just started, and I wasn't quite used to the constant thunderstorms yet. As I continued to watch the storm, I suddenly got the feeling that I was being watched. I looked out my window, but saw nothing but rain pouring off the roof. I was just about to turn back towards the opposite wall when a solitary black feather floated down seemingly from mid-air. I opened my window, letting the cool night air flow into the room. The feather landed in a puddle at the base of my window, and I realized that it looked exactly like one of the boy's feathers. I looked more closely at the puddle, and noticed that there were 2 foot-shaped depressions in it. As I watched, one of them disappeared temporarily before reappearing further away, as if an invisible person had taken a step back. I couldn't help but smile at my find. "I know you're there," I said, and if you need a place to stay the night, you can stay here, if you want." The boy appeared out of nowhere.
"How did you know I was here?"
he asked, teeth chattering. "You're losing feathers," I said, trailing off as I noticed just how terrible the boy looked. The shirt I gave him was nowhere to be seen, and his pants were drenched and muddy. The injured wing was nearly featherless and hanging limply by his side, while the other one was neatly folded across his back. On top of that, he was thin as a rail, soaking wet, and pale as a ghost. There's no way I can leave him out there like this. I pushed on the corners of my window's bug screen, popped it out, and placed it by the foot of my bed, making it possible to climb through the window. "Come on, get in before someone sees you," I said. He hesitated for a moment, considering my offer of hospitality. He must have been pretty tired, because the lure of a dry place to sleep seemed to outweigh his suspicions. He hauled himself through my window and landed on my bed, hastily getting off of it. Maybe he was afraid he'd get it dirty. He moved jerkily, like his whole body hurt, even though his only visible injury was his wing. All the cuts and burns had completely disappeared. I handed him the towel that had been drying on my closet door.
Thanks,"
he said, his teeth chattering. I knew from experience that the rain at night was pretty cold, but I didn't think it was that cold. I rummaged around in my closet and got him a clean pair of pants and a sweatshirt I found there. He took them, this time remaining silent and looking away. He was blushing. This time I was sure of it. I left the room to give him privacy, and to give myself some breathing space. Something about him made me feel really awkward.
"Hey, can you help me with this?"
he asked through the door. When I went back in the room, he had the new pants on, but was contemplating the sweatshirt. "Oh, right," I said sheepishly. I went over to my desk and rummaged around for a pair of scissors and a Sharpie. "Hold it to your chest," I instructed. He did so, and I drew lines down the back of the sweatshirt where I thought his wings would be. Then I took it back from him and compared the lines to his wings. "That should be about right," I said to myself. I took the sweatshirt over to my bed and carefully cut along the lines I'd drawn, making slits for his wings. I could feel him watching me as I worked, but when I looked over my shoulder, he seemed to be deliberately looking the other direction. "This'll work better," I told him, handing the sweatshirt back to him. He pulled it over his head, his face going deadly pale when he pushed his injured wing through its slit. Once he got his wings through the holes, he collapsed on my bed, panting. "Are you okay? I asked him.
Fine.
He said tightly. I helped him sit up, and then sat on the bed across from him. We stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity. How come your wing isn't healed yet, if all your other injuries are gone? And besides that, a fall like that should have killed you, I blurted out. I covered my mouth with a hand, and I could feel myself blushing. Sorry, I muttered. I'm an inquisitive person.
It's fine. You have the right to know, after all the help you've given me, but I'd rather not answer that,
he said, after some hesitation. Well, at least it was an answer, which was progress from the last time I'd seen him. Suddenly, the boy's stomach growled. I could get you something to eat, I offered. His stomach growled again, and he started to turn pink. What'd you like? I asked, spurring him to answer.
Anything,
he said quietly. I got the feeling that he hated asking for help. All right, I'll just be a minute, I said, standing up. I could feel the boy's gaze on my back as I left the room. When I returned, the boy's face was screwed up in pain and concentration, and little purple lights, they looked more like sparks, were cocooning his injured wing. When the sparks faded, the wing was just as it was before, though the boy's face was covered in sweat.
I don't get it,
he whispered angrily to himself.
They don't contact me, and I can't heal myself to go find them. They know that.
He didn't seem to notice that I was standing in the doorway. I walked into the room, closed the door behind me, and handed him the plate of food I'd gotten from the kitchen. He turned to face me, his face tight with worry. That purple stuff, was it magic? I was captivated by the boy. For some reason, I felt drawn to him, like a moth to a light. I slowly sat on the bed next to him and shivered at his proximity. Can I at least know your name? I asked, resisting the urge to close the distance between us.
Most people call me Zed,
he said slowly, voice almost a whisper. I recognized that name immediately, and I remembered where I'd seen him before. He must have seen the shock sprawled across my face, because he seemed to get nervous.
What?
He asked. I think I saw his name in that book. I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled the book off of it. I opened it to a random page and showed it to him. He continued looking puzzled for a moment, but then he seemed to recognize what I was showing him.
Where did you get that?
He asked, eyebrows raised in surprise. I winced and rubbed my head where the book had hit me. The bruise was gone, but when I pressed the back of my head, it still felt weird. It fell out of the sky and hit me on the head, I told him. Sort of like you did. I opened the book to one of the pages towards the middle. It depicted a boy with wavy black hair that shot wildly in every direction, as if he were facing into the wind, with glossy black wings stretched out behind him. He had brilliant purple eyes and was wearing a black, ancient Greek-style tunic. There was a silver laurel wreath on his head, and a silver bow in his hand. It was the last thing I'd seen before I put the book away. This is you, isn't it? I asked.
Yes,
he said simply.
Daniel, an acquaintance of mine, I guess, created that book nearly 3,000 years ago.
He continued, staring at it.
I was borrowing it, but I lost it.
Suddenly, something seemed to dawn on him.
The book is written in ancient Greek, and you can understand it?
He asked, eyes wide with shock. No, the only words I can understand are what I assume are the names, because they look a bit like English, I said, pointing to the bold heading that read, Zed. He seemed relieved, and let out a breath I hadn't noticed he had been holding. Without saying anything else, he absent-mindedly started eating the food I gave him. His gaze was unfocused, and as the silence continued, my mind started wandering too. This book could probably answer a lot of my questions if Zed is in it, I thought. No, I have to respect his privacy. He may not want me to read whatever's in it. Zed? I asked.
Yeah?
Most of the words are in Greek, but some of the names still brought up results in Google. I started.
Google?
He asked. A search engine. The expression on his face made it clear that he didn't know what a search engine was. You know, like Firefox is a web browser. He stared at me in bewilderment. Oh well, I tried. Anyway, a lot of these people are Greek gods and goddesses, right? Are they real, or myths? I asked. Zed's real, and he's in the book. That must mean everything else is true, too.
How could they be myths? Haven't you ever seen lightning split the sky, or the waves in the ocean?
He asked.
I've actually met a lot of these people myself.
If they're real, then Zeus controls lightning and Poseidon rules the seas, right? But scientists tell us that lightning is caused by electrons that... I dropped off when Zed's eyes seemed to glaze over and quickly changed the subject. I can't find information on a lot of these gods and goddesses, though. Why is that? He took the book from me and flipped to a page with a heading like this. Please refer to the book to see the word.
Well, this one here is Megacosm, goddess of nature.
He started.
She is considered to be one of the most powerful goddesses because she's the one that keeps life on Earth, well, alive. Since she's one of the most powerful, many think she should be ruler of the gods instead of Zeus. Zeus, being the power-hungry person that he is, kept her away from humans and out of the myths to try and suppress popular opinion.
His voice had a note of superiority to it, and his smile was a bit condescending, like he was explaining math to a toddler. I don't get it, but if Megacosm's that powerful, couldn't she just take over Olympus herself? I asked.
Megacosm is a peaceful goddess. The idea of taking over Olympus by force would appall her.
Then what does Zeus have to worry about?
Zeus is paranoid.
The entire conversation made absolutely no sense, but seeing as further exclamation would most likely confuse me, I didn't ask him to explain. He turned to a different page, this one with, "Please refer to the book," as its heading.
This one here is Lestrausa. You wouldn't know about her for the same reason. She represents light and goodness, so she is in limited control over all things good. That includes light. She could keep the entire world dark if she chose. Like Megacosm, she's also very popular with the other gods, so Zeus has to do everything he can to make it look like she's incapable of ruling, which also happens to keep her away from humans. He can't just get rid of the two of them, though, otherwise their spheres of control would disappear, ending all life as we know it.
He finished ominously. I still don't really get it. Are you a god like that? I mean, one that I haven't heard of? I asked, changing to a subject I understood.
Me? No. I'm an angel, warrior of the gods, I guess. Daniel is, at least. He's captain of Lestrausa's army. I'm more of a loner, wandering both Empyrean and the mortal world,
he said. Wait, hold up. What's Empyrean?
The entire second dimension, where the gods and magic reign. You'd call it the sky. Olympus is the capital of Empyrean.
The sky? Then why haven't I seen Olympus, or any of Empyrean's other cities? I've flown plenty of times.
Wait, you've flown before? But you're not an angel.
Of course not. Haven't you ever heard of an airplane? Zed's silence was deafening. Never mind then. Why is it that I haven't heard about Greek angels before? I asked.
You've heard of angels, haven't you?
I've heard of guardian angels and things, yeah, I said.
Where do you think that idea came from? Daniel saved the world several times, and I always try to help people out if I can. The myths aren't very specific, though, because there are only two of us,
he explained. Wait, if all this is true, then what about science? After all, we have made discoveries about how stuff like lightning works, I said.
Well, science isn't completely wrong, I guess. Scientists are just observing the gods at work. What may seem like a natural process to you is actually supernatural.
Again, that didn't make much sense to me, but I didn't press for a better explanation. I'm not sure he could give me one.
That's not all that's in the book, of course. At the moment, it shows the basic history of everyone that's ever lived in Empyrean. Do you want me to show you some of it?
He asked. I hesitated. If all that Zed was telling me was true, then science wasn't what we thought it was. It was just the power of supernatural beings at work. Super powerful, supernatural beings that Zed could teach me about. But then, that was his world's history. Only if you want to share it with me. For the first time, he smiled. It was a shy smile, as if he wasn't sure whether or not it would be rejected. I thought it was kind of cute. Not tonight, though, I said quickly, pointing at the clock on my nightstand. It's already late. Maybe tomorrow.
I'm not sure I should stay the night,
Zed told me.
What would happen if your parents come in and see an angel sleeping in your room?
I'm more worried about how they would react to a boy sleeping in my room. Can't you become invisible, though? I asked.
Would you want to be accidentally stepped on?
He asked with a smile.
Besides, staying invisible for an entire night would use more magic than I can spare.
I could lock the door, I said.
Good point.
Once he'd finished eating, I brought the plate back to the kitchen. If my parents found out that I'd had food in my room, I'd be grounded, for life. There were already plates in the sink, so one more wouldn't be noticed. Hopefully. On my way back to my room, I grabbed a blanket and a spare pillow from the hall closet. Zed seemed to be asleep sitting up, but when I came in the room, he looked up at me. You know, I said as I locked the door, I'll sleep on the floor tonight. You need the bed more than I do. He suddenly got angry.
If this is because I'm an angel, then you can forget it,
he said firmly. He started towards the window. No, it's because you're hurt. Unless you want that wing getting worse, it's a good idea that you don't sleep on the floor, I said firmly. He slowly turned to look at me, and his eyes got misty.
You'd really give up your bed for me, even though you hardly know me?
He asked. I have a little brother, and he sometimes has nightmares, so I end up sleeping on the floor a lot, I said. It's no big deal.
You sure you don't want to share it? It's big enough for 2 people,
he offered. And get a face full of feathers in the middle of the night? I pointed out, cracking a smile. I couldn't help but blush, though. He gave me a half smile in return, but then his face darkened.
Not that I have too many feathers at the moment,
he muttered.
We'd better get to sleep.
He climbed onto my bed and faced the opposite wall. I shifted around on the ground until I was in a comfortable position, and settled the blanket on top of me. I just stared at the wall for a while, silent. But before long, my eyes closed and sleep overtook me.